When I won a $10 million lottery, my greedy husband and mother-in-law demanded that I give them the money to buy a new house. I refused because I knew their nature. They were reckless and selfish. In retaliation, they forcibly tied me to a roller coaster and started the ride despite my cries for help. As the roller coaster began, they ran away, leaving me terrified and helpless. I lost consciousness before the ride ended. When it finally stopped, a witness, a kind man, helped me and rushed me to the hospital to save my life. But when I opened my eyes in the hospital, another horrific shock was waiting for me. My name is Emily, and if you had told me 6 months ago that my life would take such a drastic turn, I wouldn't have believed you. I was just a regular 30-year-old office worker in Los Angeles, living a modest life. My husband, Mark, and I had been married for 3 years. He was a real estate agent who often struggled to make ends meet, but I loved him, or at least I thought I did. We lived in a small apartment, and while things weren't perfect, I believed we were building a life together. Everything changed the day I won the lottery. It was a Friday evening. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and casually checking my ticket against the numbers announced on the TV. I wasn't expecting anything. I bought those tickets occasionally, like everyone else, for fun. But when I realized I had all the winning numbers, my hands started to shake. $10 million. I was now worth $10 million. Mark wasn't home at the time. He had gone to meet his mother, Diane. She and I never got along. Diane was 58, retired, and had a knack for making me feel small with her passive-aggressive comments. She would say things like, "Emily, you should really learn to cook better. Mark needs someone to take care of him properly," or "This apartment is so cramped." If I had chosen a wife for Mark, she'd have brought more to the table. When Mark returned home that night, I told him about the lottery win. At first, he was ecstatic, hugging me and spinning me around. But soon, his excitement turned into something else, something colder, more calculating. He called Diane right away to share the news, and within an hour, she was at our apartment. "You need to buy a proper house, Emily," Diane declared as soon as she walked in. "Something grand, something worthy of this kind of money." "I haven't even had time to think about it," I replied cautiously. Mark jumped in, backing her up. "Mom's right, Emily. This apartment is awful. We could move to Beverly Hills or Malibu. Imagine the life we could have." "We?" That word made my stomach twist. This money was supposed to change my life, not fund their fantasies. I smiled politely and said I needed time to figure things out. But the truth was I was starting to feel uneasy. Over the next few days, Mark and Diane became relentless. They were like a team, planning my money's future without me. Diane even picked out a mansion online, showing me pictures and saying, "This one has a pool and a guest house. It's perfect for all the parties we'll throw." I tried to reason with Mark in private. "We don't need a mansion. We can buy a nice house, something practical, and still have money left for savings and investments." But he wasn't interested in practicality. "Emily, stop being so selfish. This is our chance to live like royalty." Selfish. That word stung. How could I be selfish when this money was mine, something I had won on my own? I wasn't even saying no. I just wanted to be cautious. But Mark didn't see it that way, and neither did Diane. They started treating me differently, as if I were the outsider, the one ruining their dreams. One evening, Diane confronted me directly. "Emily, you've always been small-minded. Mark deserves better than this penny-pinching attitude of yours. If you can't see that, you're not the woman I thought you were." That was the moment I knew I couldn't give in. I wasn't going to let them bully me into giving up control of my life. But standing my ground came at a price. Mark became colder, distant. He barely spoke to me unless it was about the money, and when he did, it was always with frustration or anger. Diane was no better. She stopped pretending to be polite and openly criticized me whenever she could. One night, after another argument, Mark said something I'll never forget. "You've changed, Emily. This money has turned you into someone I don't recognize." I stared at him, stunned. "Me? I'm the one who's changed." He didn't answer. He just walked away, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. I started to notice other things too. Whispered phone calls between Mark and Diane when they thought I wasn't listening. The way they'd exchange glances whenever I refused one of their outrageous demands. It was like they were plotting something, and for the first time in my marriage, I didn't trust my husband. But I couldn't have imagined what they were planning. Not yet. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. I should have known that people can change when money is involved, or maybe money just reveals who they really are. Either way, I was about to find out just how far Mark and Diane would go to get what they wanted. At the time, I thought the worst thing was losing the people I thought loved me. I had no idea that their betrayal would soon become something far more cruel and far more dangerous. I wish I could say that things got better after that. But the truth is, they only got worse. Mark and Diane's obsession with the money consumed every part of our lives. It wasn't just about the house anymore. They started pressuring me about everything, what I should buy, where I should invest, and who I should trust. It felt like every decision I made was met with their disapproval. One morning, Mark brought up the house again. "Emily, you're dragging your feet for no reason. We've found the perfect place. Why are you being so difficult?" "I'm not being difficult, Mark," I said, trying to stay calm. "I just don't think buying a mansion is the right choice. I want to save most of this money. I've read stories about lottery winners losing everything because they spent too much too quickly. I don't want that to happen to us." Mark slammed his coffee mug down on the table, startling me. "You're paranoid. We're not those people, Emily. Stop treating me and my mom like we're out to ruin you." But that was exactly how it felt. Every conversation turned into an argument, and I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. Diane didn't help matters. She was over at our apartment constantly, acting like she already owned the place. One day, she cornered me in the kitchen while Mark was out. "You know, Emily, you're lucky to have Mark. A lot of men would have left by now. With the way you've been acting." I froze, gripping the counter. "What's that supposed to mean?" She smirked, her tone dripping with condescension. "It means you're not exactly irreplaceable. Men like Mark need a partner who supports their dreams, not someone who holds them back." I wanted to yell at her, to tell her to get out of my house. But I didn't. I just stood there, letting her words sink in. For the first time, I wondered if Mark felt the same way. A few days later, Mark suggested a family trip to Six Flags. "You've been so stressed lately," he said, putting on his most charming smile. "A day of fun will do us all some good." I was surprised by the suggestion. Mark wasn't exactly the type to plan outings like this, especially not with everything going on. But I agreed, hoping it might ease the tension between us. When we arrived at the park, things seemed normal at first. Mark and Diane were in high spirits, laughing and joking as we made our way through the crowds. I even started to relax a little, thinking maybe this was their way of trying to make amends. But then we got to the roller coasters. I've always been terrified of them. Just looking at the towering tracks made my stomach churn. Mark knew this. He teased me about it on our honeymoon when I refused to get on a ride. So when Diane suggested we all go on one of the biggest coasters in the park, I thought she was joking. "You know I can't do that," I said, shaking my head. Diane rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Emily. It's just a ride. Stop being so dramatic." Mark chimed in. "She's right. You're being ridiculous. You need to face your fears sometime." I tried to laugh it off. "You guys go ahead. I'll wait for you here." But they wouldn't let it go. Diane grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the entrance. "You're coming with us. It's not up for debate." Panic started to set in. "No, really, I can't." Mark cut me off, his voice cold. "Emily, stop making a scene. Just get on the ride." Before I knew it, they were dragging me toward the line. I felt like I was in a nightmare, my heart pounding as we got closer and closer to the front. When it was our turn, Mark and Diane forced me into the seat. I was shaking, tears streaming down my face as the attendants secured the restraints. I begged them to let me off, but Mark just looked at me with that same cold expression I'd seen so many times lately. "You'll be fine," he said flatly. And then they walked away. The ride started to move, and I felt sheer terror take over. I screamed for them to stop it, but no one could hear me over the roar of the coaster. As it climbed higher and higher, I felt like I was going to die. By the time it plummeted down the first drop, I blacked out completely. The next thing I remember was waking up on the ground, surrounded by strangers. Someone was shaking me gently, asking if I was okay. "Can you hear me?" a man's voice said. I opened my eyes and saw a concerned face staring down at me. He introduced himself as Jack, a paramedic who happened to be in the park that day.
"You passed out on the ride," he said.
"I saw the whole thing. Are you with anyone?" I looked around, but Mark and Diane were nowhere to be found. My heart sank as I realized they had abandoned me. They left me," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. Jack's expression hardened. "Don't worry. I'm here now. Let's get you checked out." As he helped me to my feet, I felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over me. Mark and Diane had gone too far this time. And for the first time, I realized that I couldn't keep ignoring the truth. They didn't care about me. They only cared about the money. But they were about to learn that some lines shouldn't be crossed. And I wasn't going to let them get away with this. When Jack helped me to my feet that day at Six Flags, my body felt weak, but my mind was racing. I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Mark and Diane, my husband and his mother, had forced me onto that roller coaster knowing how terrified I was. And then they had abandoned me. I kept replaying it in my head, trying to make sense of it, but the truth was staring me in the face. They didn't just want to hurt me. They wanted to break me. Jack was patient as I explained the situation to him in the medical tent. He sat across from me, his kind, steady eyes never leaving mine. "They left me," I said again, my voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and anger. "They left me there knowing I was terrified. Knowing." I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Jack leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Emily, that's not normal. That's not something people who care about you would do. Are you sure you're safe with them?" Safe? I hadn't even considered that. Until now, I thought their actions were just selfish and cruel. But Jack's words planted a seed of doubt. What if it wasn't just about the money anymore? What if this was about control? About punishment? As if sensing my thoughts, Jack asked, "Do you mind if I ask a tough question? Have they done anything else like this before?" I hesitated, my hands clenching into fists on my lap. "Not like this," I admitted. "But they've changed. Ever since I won the lottery, it's like I'm just a bank account to them. They don't listen to me anymore. They don't care what I want." Jack nodded slowly. "I don't want to overstep, but you shouldn't have to deal with this alone. If you want, I can help." At first, I didn't know what he meant. But then he held up his phone. "I was recording some of the rides today," he explained. "I saw what happened to you, and I recorded that too. The way they dragged you onto the roller coaster, the way they left you, it's all on here." My heart skipped a beat. "You recorded it?" "Yes," he said. "And I think you should use it. This is more than just a family fight, Emily. What they did was dangerous. They put your life at risk." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to brush it off, to tell Jack I'd handle it on my own. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt and humiliated over and over again, knew he was right. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up to them and taking back control of my life. "Okay," I said finally. "What do we do?" The next few days were a whirlwind. Jack helped me file a police report, and together we handed over the video evidence. The police took it seriously, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone. It was a small comfort, knowing that there were people who believed me, who wanted to help. But I couldn't stop thinking about Mark. The man I married wasn't supposed to be like this. I had loved him once, trusted him. How had it come to this? I stayed with a friend while the investigation unfolded. I didn't dare go back to the apartment, not after what had happened. Mark tried calling me a few times, but I didn't answer. Diane left me a nasty voicemail, accusing me of being dramatic and ungrateful. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Then one day the police called. "We've arrested Mark and Diane," the officer said. "The evidence was compelling, and we've charged them with assault and reckless endangerment." Hearing those words should have made me feel relieved, but instead I felt hollow. This wasn't how I wanted things to end. But deep down, I knew it was the only way. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The trial was grueling. Mark and Diane tried to paint me as the villain, claiming I was selfish and vindictive, but the video told a different story. When the jury saw how they had treated me, how they had left me on that roller coaster, their sympathy evaporated. It was clear to everyone in the courtroom that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was calculated cruelty. When the verdict came, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a hint of closure. Mark and Diane were sentenced to prison. The judge called their actions a disturbing betrayal of trust, and I couldn't have agreed more. Afterward, Jack found me outside the courthouse. He smiled gently and said, "It's over now. You can move on." "Thank you," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you." Jack shook his head. "You did this, Emily. You stood up for yourself. That takes real courage." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was free. After the trial, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring out into the unknown. For so long, my life had revolved around Mark, Diane, and the constant tension they brought. Now, for the first time, I was free of them. But freedom is complicated. It doesn't erase the scars left behind. It just gives you the space to heal. I took things one day at a time. I sold the apartment Mark and I had shared, wanting nothing to do with the place where so much of my pain had taken root. I found a cozy new home in a quiet neighborhood, nothing extravagant but warm and peaceful, just what I needed. The money, the lottery winnings that had started all of this, felt different now. I had been so excited when I won, thinking it would bring me joy and security. But it had also brought out the worst in the people closest to me. I decided to use it wisely this time, setting up a financial advisor to help me plan for the future. I made donations to causes that mattered to me, knowing that giving back would help me heal. Through it all, Jack stayed in my life. He wasn't just the man who had rescued me at Six Flags. He became a friend, someone I could rely on when I felt overwhelmed. He had this way of reminding me that not everyone was out to hurt me. One evening, a few months after the trial, we sat on the porch of my new house, watching the sunset. I was quiet, lost in thought, and Jack noticed. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked with a smile. I sighed. It's just hard to believe this is my life now. For so long, I let Mark and Diane control everything. I thought if I just gave in, they'd stop. But they never did. Jack nodded. People like that don't stop. They take and take until there's nothing left. But you did something a lot of people can't. You fought back. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I felt a sense of pride in myself. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said. "You didn't need me," he replied. "I was just there to give you a push. The strength, that was all you." Those words stayed with me. For so long, I had seen myself as weak, as someone who couldn't stand up to the people who hurt her. But Jack was right. I had found the strength to fight back, to reclaim my life, and to move forward. In the months that followed, I started to rebuild. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I threw myself into hobbies I had neglected for years: painting, hiking, and even volunteering at a local shelter. Slowly, I began to see the world as a place of possibility again, not just a series of painful memories. One day, while cleaning out some old boxes, I found a photo of Mark and me from our wedding. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. I had loved him once, believed in our future together. But as I looked closer, I realized the sadness wasn't about losing him. It was about losing the version of myself who had thought she wasn't enough. I took a deep breath and placed the photo in the trash. That chapter was over. As for Diane, I didn't think about her much. She and Mark were serving their sentences, and I had no desire to keep tabs on them. They were part of my past, not my future. The strangest thing about moving on is how ordinary it feels after a while. At first, every step forward was a battle. But eventually, those steps became easier, until one day I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was living. The lottery had changed my life in ways I never could have predicted. It had brought out the worst in some people and introduced me to the best in others. It had tested me in ways I didn't think I could handle, but it had also shown me how strong I could be. Looking back, I don't regret any of it. Not the betrayal, not the heartbreak, not even the fear. Every piece of it led me to where I am now, stronger, wiser, and finally free. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am.